Our database spans 10,000 star systems. It documents every known predator, every reason for the kill, hunger, fear, defense. The motive was always survival, until we cross-referenced the data from a small blue world called Earth and found an anomaly that rewrote every axiom: humanity, the only species in the recorded galaxy that hunts not out of need, but for something they call sport. We are the Galactic Institute of Xenobiology. For centuries, our mandate was simple: classify, comprehend, and catalog. But your planet's data stream forced a new question into our records, one that now threatens our entire understanding of natural order. What does it mean when a species' apex predator is not driven by hunger, but by something far more elusive and terrifying? This is not an entry in our database, it is an existential anomaly. And it began with a single, baffling transaction. The transaction was for 58,000 galactic standard units. The item purchased: the right to pursue, kill, and decapitate a mature male Panthera leo a creature you call a lion. The stated purpose on the permit was not resource allocation or population control. It was listed as personal achievement. This was our first data point. We assumed it was an error. Our institute operates on the core axiom that all behavior is adaptive. A predator culls the sick and the slow. A scavenger takes the leftovers. Even the most brutal territorial dispute serves a reproductive or survival function. The database is built on this logic. So when our deep scan cultural monitors on Earth began flagging millions of similar transactions, the system flagged a contradiction, not an error, a pattern. I am researcher Xyle, cephalopod-derived, logic specialized. My role is to find the adaptive function. My colleagues are Xin, a raptor analog from a world of aerial pack hunters, and Kree, whose species evolved from ambush predators in a lightless ocean. We are, by galactic standards, the experts on predation. We have seen everything, or so we believed. The initial Earth dossier was standard: planet classification, death world light, high gravity, volatile weather, toxic biosphere, rampant megafauna predation, a textbook cradle for a hardy, survival-focused sapient species. Your history followed predictable arcs: tool use, agriculture, industrialization. Your wars, while shockingly frequent, were logged under standard resource scarcity conflicts. You were filed as aggressive but comprehensible. Case closed. Then the subcultural data streams activated, not the official histories, but the personal logs, the visual media, the economic subnetworks. This is where we found the discrepancies. It began with the wall, a visual record from a human dwelling in a region called Texas. The wall was not a structural component. It was a display. Mounted upon it were the heads of 17 different species: ungulates, carnivores, a large bear. Each face was preserved in a perpetual snarl. The human beside it was smiling. The data tag read, "My trophy room after a great season." Xin analyzed it first. Her people understand the pride of a successful hunt. The nourishment, the provision for the clan. She input the parameters. The biomass of the kills was substantial, yet there was no subsequent data on meat processing or distribution, only records of preservation chemicals and taxidermy services. She reran the analysis. "They are not consuming most of these," she pulsed, her feathers ruffling in confusion. "The energy expenditure to acquire the prey exceeds the caloric yield harvested. The equation is negative. This is biologically irrational." We widened the search. The term trophy hunting returned over 300 million primary references. We saw humans paying not for meat, but for specific animal attributes: the widest horn spread, the darkest fur, the largest tusks. We found guide services, scoring systems, ranking competitions. The death of the animal was not the unfortunate byproduct of sustenance. It was the stated goal. The trophy was the proof. Kree, our ambush predator specialist, was fascinated and repelled. "On my world, to reveal your position without the guarantee of a kill is suicide. To expend energy without consumption is evolutionary death. These humans are broadcasting their kills. They are seeking social status from waste." But the scale was what broke our initial models. This was not a fringe activity. The economic footprint was planetary. We isolated a single year. The figures were staggering: over $1 billion spent on guided big game hunts in Africa alone. Thousands of lions, elephants, leopards, animals listed as threatened in their own ecological databases, were legally killed. not for population management, as some agencies claimed, but because the demand existed. Then we found the fishing. Our oceans specialist, Cree, initially soothed. Our aquatic resource gathering, this is familiar. But the data again defied expectation. This was not industrial fishing. This was recreational. Humans used elaborate artificial lures designed not to efficiently catch food, but to trick the fish. They would catch a fish, often document the event with a visual record, and then release it, alive, sometimes injured. Zin's talons clicked against the analysis console. They stalk, they capture, they cause stress and potential injury, and then they relinquish the prey. This is not predation. This is play. They are using another creature's struggle for their amusement. The psychological profiles we began to assemble were the most disturbing layer. We tapped into your own scientific studies. Human researchers had a term for it, the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, traits that in isolated pockets exist in other social predators. But your studies showed a statistically significant correlation between these traits and the desire for trophy hunting. The kill was a form of ego reinforcement. The posing with the dead animal, the smile of true pleasure, your researchers noted, was about dominance, achievement, and self-aggrandizement. We cross-referenced this with your historical records of violence. The link was there, acknowledged by your own kind. Those who committed acts of cruelty against animals showed a higher propensity for violence against their own species. The pleasure in the kill was transferable. It was not about the target, it was about the act itself. One night cycle in the quiet hum of the lab, Zin voiced the chilling conclusion. We have documented predators who kill in excess, surplus killing, the weasel in the henhouse, the leopard in the herd, but this is always explained by instinctual overflow, a failure of the off switch in the presence of overwhelming prey stimuli. It is a glitch. What we are seeing in humans is not a glitch. It is a asterisk feature asterisk. They have systematized it. They have built economies, social structures, and personal identities around the recreational kill. They have taken an evolutionary glitch and coded it into their culture. The weight of it settled over us. We were no longer studying a simple predatory anomaly. We were looking at a psychological and cultural fractal that reflected a terrifying truth about human nature. Your planet's apex predator wasn't just another animal. It was a creature that had externalized its predatory drive, divorced it from survival, and weaponized it for something as nebulous as fun, pride, or personal fulfillment. But we still held onto one hope, one last, fragile hypothesis. Perhaps this was a cultural aberration, a phase, a destructive behavior that your species, in its sapient wisdom, was moving to suppress. We decided to run one final, deep temporal analysis, tracking the trajectory of these practices against your technological and ethical development. The results loaded onto our main holoscreen. The graph showed two lines. One was your technological advancement, a steep exponential curve. The other was the economic and social engagement with recreational killing. For a moment, in your mid-20th century, the lines had diverged. Ethical laws were passed. Endangered species acts were created. There was a dip, a hope. Then in the late 20th century, the two lines turned, and they began to rise together, not inversely, in parallel. Your technology wasn't eradicating the behavior, it was enabling it. More efficient weapons, global booking platforms, social media to display the trophies. The industry was growing, not shrinking. It was becoming more efficient, more accessible, more ingrained. Zin stared at the converging lines. They are not outgrowing it, they are optimizing it. That was the moment our fundamental premise shattered. This was not an ancient, dying instinct. It was a modern, evolving one, and if that was true, then every projection in our database was wrong. Every assessment of human threat potential was a catastrophic undercalculation. We had to go deeper. We had to understand the origin point. Not the how, but the why. What evolutionary quirk on your death world could possibly explain this? We needed to look past the statistics and the psychology and into the deep, primal wiring of the human brain itself. The answer, when we found it, was not in your savannas or your forests. It was in your pleasure centers. The answer was in your pleasure centers. We mapped the human neurochemical reward pathways. The expectation was to find the standard predator-prey feedback loop: hunger, pursuit, consumption, satiation. What we found was a short circuit, a bypass. The climax of the hunt, the moment of the kill, triggered a dopamine and adrenaline cascade identical to winning a game, or hearing applause, or falling in love. For the human brain, killing was the reward. Survival was irrelevant. Zin was horrified. This is a pathology, a broken feedback mechanism. On my world, a hunter who took pleasure in the kill itself and not the nourishment that followed would be ostracized. They would starve, alone, their instincts useless. But Kree from the Dark Ocean understood something deeper. It is not broken, it is repurposed asterisk. My kind has a similar spike during the ambush, the thrill of the successful strike, but it is tightly coupled to the need to eat. What if you evolved in an environment so brutally efficient, where the hunt was so guaranteed, that the neurological reward detached from the consummation, the thrill became the point? We delved into your deep evolutionary history, the persistence hunt. Your ancestors on the African savanna didn't have claws or fangs, they had endurance. They would select a prey animal and simply follow it under the blistering sun for miles, for hours, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion and heat stroke. Then they would walk up and dispatch it. The energy cost was enormous. The success rate was high. The key was the long, drawn-out pursuit. The brain had to reward the asterisk process asterisk, not just the end point. It had to make the chase itself compelling, addictive. The kill became the final release of a tremendous buildup of tension. We were looking at the evolutionary origin of the suspense thriller. This was our first major pivot. Recreational hunting wasn't a perversion of the predator instinct. It was a purified expression of it. Humans had removed the messy, biological necessity of eating and distilled the hunt down to its neurological essence. The chase, the climax, the trophy as a token of victory. This explained the fishing, the catch and release. It was the chase, the struggle, the mastery, triggering the reward chemistry without the inconvenient endpoint of death. Unless, of course, they wanted a trophy for the wall. Then the death was reinstated, not for food, but as the ultimate token. But if this was a hardwired neurological pathway, then it wouldn't be confined to hunting. It would leak. It would seek expression everywhere. We widened the scan parameters, and the true scale of the phenomenon exploded before us. We found the simulated hunts, elaborate, fictional scenarios where humans would spend hours controlling digital avatars to stalk and kill digital animals. They called them video games. The market for these simulations was valued at over $170 billion. The most popular titles involved military combat, hunting other humans. The neural imaging studies we accessed showed identical pleasure center activation to real-world trophy hunters during a successful virtual kill. We found the blood sports, ancient Rome's gladiatorial games, Spanish bullfights, cockfighting, dogfighting, humans constructing elaborate arenas to watch captive animals fight to the death for their entertainment. The economic and cultural footprint was massive, persisting for millennia, often disguised as tradition. We found the competitive aspect, not just killing, but killing better than another human. Scoring systems based on the size of the antlers, the rarity of the fur, leaderboards. They weren't just competing with the animal, they were competing with each other. The trophy was a unit of social currency. Then we found the most disturbing corollary, the collection impulse. It wasn't just about one kill, it was about sets, completing a series. A hunter would seek to kill one of every species in a category, the Big Five in Africa, the Grand Slam of sheep. This was no longer about a singular experience. It was about cataloging, about ownership, about imposing a personal order on the natural world through its destruction. Kree floated silently before the data stream showing a human's life list of hundreds of birds, each ticked off. This is not hunting, this is curation. They are using death as a method of classification. They are making a museum of the wild with themselves as the sole collector. The institutional layer became clear. This wasn't a rogue individual behavior. Entire planetary structures existed to facilitate it. Governments issued permits and tags, creating a legal market for the right to kill specific creatures. Wildlife management agencies, often funded by hunter fees, made population decisions based on maintaining huntable numbers. Conservation organizations, paradoxically, sometimes accepted money from trophy hunting interests, creating a twisted ethical feedback loop where killing endangered animals was framed as saving them. We presented our interim findings to the Institute director, a being of crystalline logic from a non-predatory species. We showed the neuromaps, the economic flows, the cultural permeation. The director's communication was a cold, sharp frequency. You are describing a sophisticated pleasure parasitism. The organism derives its primary psychological rewards from the termination of other life forms and has built a civilization that cultivates this as a hobby. This goes beyond predation. This is a psychological invasive species. What is the containment prognosis? Containment, the word hung in the air. We had been studying. Now we were being asked to assess risk. We ran the projections. If this drive was as fundamental as we suspected, then human expansion posed a unique threat. Not because they would hunt galactic fauna for food, they wouldn't need to, but because they might hunt them for sport, for a new trophy, for a new entry on a list, for the thrill of a new kind of chase. The model was chilling, a species that explores not out of resource necessity or curiosity, but in search of novel experiences, including novel kills. We imagined human hunters arriving on a pristine world, seeing a magnificent, six-horned grazer, and their first thought not being scientific wonder, but what a magnificent mount for my lounge. But then came the second pivot, the one that split our research team. While analyzing the darkest corners of the datanet, the places where humans discussed the illegal trade, the poaching, the explicit pleasure in suffering, Zin found a countercurrent. She called up a new dataset. You are focusing on the poison, she pulsed, her feathers smoothing. Look at the antidote. She showed us the cultural movement of ethical hunting. Humans who argued for fair chase, for using every part of the animal, for hunting only as a means of population control and sustenance. She showed us the rise of environmentalism, the laws protecting endangered species, the millions who donated to wildlife conservation. She showed us something else, disgust. A significant percentage of humans viewed trophy hunting with revulsion. They created social stigma, they passed laws against cruelty, they boycotted countries that allowed it. This wasn't a monolithic culture, it was a species in a state of violent internal conflict over its own nature. Cree was skeptical. The existence of an immune response does not negate the disease, it proves the disease is recognized as such. The conflict itself is the pathology. But Zin insisted, they are not mindless, they are moral. They are arguing about it, they are trying to cage their own instincts with ethics. No other species in our database does that. This is not a flaw, it is the defining tension of their sapience. The debate raged in our lab. Were humans a planetary predator gone rogue, a threat to galactic ecological sanity, or were they the only species cursed and blessed with the awareness of their own predatory shadow, fighting a civil war inside their own skulls? We needed a tiebreaker, a decisive data point. We decided to look not at the hunters, but at the most extreme opposite, humans who had never hunted, who abhorred violence. We would scan their neuroresponses to see if the predatory pleasure circuitry was dormant or absent. We selected a group, lifelong vegetarians, pacifists, animal rights activists. We monitored their neural activity while exposing them to simulated hunts and violent imagery. The results were the most terrifying of all. Their pleasure centers did not activate, that was true, but their amygdala the threat detection and fear center, showed hyperactivity. They weren't indifferent. They were experiencing the mirrored equivalent of the hunter's thrill, a profound, empathetic distress. They were feeling the prey's fear. The wiring was still there, the same neural hardware, just running a different software. In some, it generated pleasure from the kill. In others, it generated horror from the same act, two sides of the same coin. This meant the potential for the behavior existed in virtually every human. The difference was cultural programming, personal ethics, and choice, a switch that could be flipped. The director's final query pulsed through the lab. Conclusion: is the drive to kill for pleasure an immutable, species-level constant? We synthesized our data. The answer was yes and no. The neurological asterisk capacity asterisk was a constant. The asterisk expression was not. It was a spectrum influenced by a million factors. But the capacity itself was the threat. A switch can be flipped by circumstance, by ideology, by desperation, by a single charismatic voice redefining pleasure. We compiled our risk assessment. It was not reassuring. We classified Homo sapiens asterisk not as a straightforward predatory threat, but as a volatile ethical paradox. A species with the biological hardware for recreational killing, the technological capability to enact it on a cosmic scale, and a fractured, unstable cultural software trying, and often failing, to regulate it. The report was sent to the Galactic Council's Xenological Security Committee. For the first time in Institute history, a species was flagged not for its weaponry or its territorial ambition, but for its psychology of fun. We thought our work was done. We were wrong. 2 cycles later, we received a direct, encrypted data packet from a long-range scout probe on the edge of explored space, near a sector humans had designated Orion. The probe had been monitoring the first unmanned human vessels venturing beyond their solar system. The packet contained sensor logs and visual captures. It showed a sleek human probe equipped with sophisticated scanners and sample collectors, and attached to its hull, clearly visible, was a polished, metallic plaque. The plaque depicted 2 human figures, a male and a female, and alongside them, schematics of their planetary system. And a single, graphic illustration of a human hunter, spear raised, standing over a fallen animal. It was a greeting, a message in a bottle for the cosmos, a statement of identity. Zin stared at the image, the hunter frozen in time on the side of the spacecraft. They are not just bringing their biology, she whispered. They are bringing their mythology, their story of themselves. The scout probe had detected something else. Anomalous energy signatures from a small, previously catalogued planetoid in the system the human vessel was approaching. Signatures that didn't match natural geological processes. Signatures that, according to older records, indicated the presence of a small, pre-sapient burrowing species. A species the Galactic Council had placed under an observation protocol to be left undisturbed until it reached cognitive maturity. The human vessel was on a direct course for it. Protocol demanded non-interference. We could only watch. The human probe entered orbit. It deployed a lander. For 27 hours, it conducted standard geological and atmospheric scans. Then its behavior changed. It began tracking the heat signatures of the largest burrowers, not for census. Its targeting sensors were activating. We realized too late that we had misunderstood its primary mission. It wasn't just an explorer, it was a tester. And it had found something to test its weapons on. The lander extended a metallic arm, not a drill or a scoop, a barrel, a compact, electromagnetic projectile launcher. It was a tool for obtaining samples through ballistic force, a standard piece of kit for a rugged environment, but its programming parameters were not standard. It was selecting targets based on size, movement, and our analysis confirmed perceived challenge. It is classifying them as game asterisk, Zin pulsed, her avian voice tight with dread. The first shot was a kinetic dart, designed to penetrate and retrieve a tissue sample from a rock formation. It fired at a burrower the size of a small ground vehicle as the creature emerged into the thin sunlight. The dart struck. The creature recoiled and fled into its burrow, injured. The lander's arm retracted the sample, a fragment of flesh and chitin. Data streamed back to the orbiting probe, penetration depth, tissue density, target vitality pre- and post-impact. Then it selected another target, and another. It wasn't trying to kill, it was testing lethality. It was gathering data on how its weapons performed against living, moving, alien biology. This was worse than hunting. This was a field test. We sent an urgent override request to the Galactic Council. The Observer Protocol was being violated. A pre-sapient species was being harmed. The request was logged. And then it entered the bureaucratic queue. it would take cycles for a decision. We had no authority to act, but we had a link to the scout probe. Kree, operating on an ambush predator's instinct for improvisation, suggested a gambit. We cannot stop the machine, but we can change the test. He proposed using the scout probe's low-power comm laser to send a pulsed signal to the lander. Not a complex message, but a simple, repeating pattern of prime numbers, the universal sign of sapient communication. The hope was that the lander's threat assessment algorithms would recategorize the burrowers from environmental fauna to potential sentient life and abort the weapons test. We fired the laser. The pattern washed over the lander. For a moment, it paused. Its sensors swiveled. It seemed to be reanalyzing. Then it resumed its targeting sequence. The human programming was robust. It dismissed the signal as geological or instrumental noise. The tests continued. We were forced to witness a dry run of human first contact, an automated system programmed with a hunter's curiosity, shooting at the natives. After the seventh sample, the lander packed up. It ascended back to the probe. The mission data was compiled and transmitted on a tight beam back toward Earth. The probe then moved on to the next planetoid, the next potential testing ground. The fallout was immediate within the Institute. The director's crystalline form resonated with cold fury. Your risk assessment was correct, but its timeline was optimistic. They are not a future threat. They are *current *contaminant. The volatile ethical paradox has left its home system. The switch has been flipped, not by a human, but by their unfeeling, pre-programmed proxy. A new directive was issued. The entire human dossier was upgraded to active containment concern. The Council was notified of the incident. Debates raged across galactic channels. Some factions argued for immediate, covert action to sabotage human deep space programs. Others advocated for a direct, diplomatic warning. The pacifist majority was paralyzed by the novelty of a threat that came not from conquest, but from curiosity armed with rifles. Our team was ordered to find a predictive model. If we couldn't stop them yet, we needed to know where they would strike next. What would attract a human hunter on a galactic scale? We went back to the data. We mapped every trophy hunter's dream against astrobiological databases. We looked for correlates: size, rarity, aesthetic novelty, perceived danger. The concept of the trophy was key. It was a symbol of victory over a challenge. Kree, analyzing the aesthetic preferences, made a grim connection. Look at their mythology, their stories of great beasts, dragons, krakens, creatures of immense size and power, often from other worlds. They don't just want to kill an animal, they want to kill a legend. Their first interstellar trophy won't be a grazing herbivore. It will be the biggest, most dangerous thing they can find. We cross-referenced. Our database had 37 cataloged species across nearby star systems that fit the archetypal monster profile to a human aesthetic: large, armored, predatory, or dramatically unique. One in particular stood out: a silicon-based life-form in the Hyades cluster, a colossal, slow-moving behemoth that fed on stellar radiation through crystalline sails. To humans, it would look like a living mountain of gemstones, a dragon made of diamond. It was a protected species, and it was directly in the path of projected human exploratory expansion within 2 centuries. But the model also showed something we hadn't considered: a feedback loop. The very act of announcing a threat could create the threat. If we, as a galactic community, reacted with fear and placed humans in a box labeled dangerous predators, we would be fulfilling their own darkest mythology about themselves. We would become the fearful villagers, and they might feel compelled to become the monsters we feared. Zin argued passionately for this view. We are at a decision point. We can treat them as a disease and attempt to quarantine them. This will confirm their belief that the universe is a hostile place where only the strong survive. Or we can attempt to treat them as patients, as a species suffering from a dangerous addiction to their own primal wiring. We must offer them a different story. The Council was not convinced. The image of the lander shooting the burrower was too potent. The decision was made. A first contact package would be prepared, but it would be a warning, a delineation of galactic law with severe consequences for harm to protected species. It was to be transmitted to Earth as soon as possible, a fence around the playground. Then the second transmission from the Scout probe arrived. The human vessel had reached the edge of a different system, one with a gas giant, and it had found something we had missed. A faint, structured radio signal emanating from a moon. It wasn't a pre-sapient burrower. It was a nascent civilization, a species of amphibious thinkers just discovering electromagnetism, broadcasting their first clumsy songs and pictures into the void. And the human probe had changed course. It was heading for the moon, not to test weapons. This time, it was deploying a complex array of listening dishes. It was settling into orbit. It was starting to listen. The relief in our lab was palpable but short-lived. Cree focused on a different data point. The probe was also broadcasting a signal back toward the moon, a repeating series of images, mathematical concepts, the periodic table, a diagram of their solar system, and the same illustration from the plaque, the human figures, and the hunter. "They are sharing their story," Zin said, a note of hope in her tone. "They are making contact." "Yes," Cree countered, his bioluminescence flashing dark blue. "They are sharing their story, the story that includes the hunter as a fundamental part of their identity. They are introducing themselves to a child species with an image of a killer standing over its prey. What message does that send? Is it a warning, or is it a blueprint?" The debate was cut short by a priority alert. Deep spectrum analysis of the human probe's transmission to the moon had uncovered a buried data layer. It wasn't just friendly greetings, it contained schematics, simple ones, for tools, for basic machinery, and for a particularly efficient type of bow. It was a gift of knowledge, but knowledge of what? Agriculture or weaponry? The council was thrown into chaos. Was this an act of benevolent mentorship, or was it the first step in a longer game, arming a naive species, perhaps to create a more challenging hunt in the future? Our models couldn't agree. The human paradox was now being injected directly into another species' development. We had reached the limit of remote observation. We were reacting, always one step behind, interpreting shadows. The director delivered the final verdict on our research phase. "The predictive model is incomplete because a key variable is unknown, human asterisk intent at the species level. We have mapped their hardware and their software, but we cannot predict the choices of a divided mind. To understand that, we require a dialogue, a dangerous one." A decision was made. The first contact warning package was put on hold. Instead, a new mission was authorized, a mission of supreme risk. Our research team, Zyle, Zin, and Cree, would be dispatched. We would take a cloaked vessel. We would intercept the next unmanned human probe on its way out of their system, and we would not just observe. We would attempt to hack its communication array, and we would send a message, not to their governments, but directly into the data stream of one of their global networks. A message designed not to threaten, but to diagnose, to reflect their own paradox back at them in terms they could not ignore. We would show them the lander shooting the burrower. We would show them the trophy room walls. We would show them the neuroscans of pleasure and pain, and we would ask them a single, galactic-level question. The mission was not diplomatic, it was clinical, it was an intervention. As our ship slipped into the void, heading for the dark between stars, I reviewed the message we would embed in their information ocean. It ended with our question, the one that would determine whether the galaxy would one day face a wave of explorers or a wave of hunters. "We see what you are. Do you know what you are, and which part of you is coming to visit us?" The hack was a surgical strike. We piggybacked our data packet onto a routine telemetry burst from a human entertainment satellite. We chose the channel carefully, a global live stream event called the Planetary Wildlife Conservation Gala. One moment, a human celebrity was thanking donors. The next, our footage filled screens across the world, the lander firing on the burrower, the trophy room walls, the neuroscans, and our question, "We see what you are. Do you know what you are?" The signal was unstoppable, untraceable, and live. Silence in our cloaked vessel was absolute. On Earth, it lasted only 3.2 seconds. Then, the digital ocean erupted. We monitored the global data stream. The initial reaction was disbelief, then viral shock. The footage was analyzed frame by frame. The new imaging was debated by experts. The Lander incident was cross-referenced with Deep Space Agency logs and confirmed as anomalous. Our question became the dominant trending topic on every major network. It was not a declaration of war. It was a diagnosis from the stars, and humanity was forced to sit in the therapist's chair. The fracturing we had observed from a distance now played out in real time, amplified to a planetary volume. Conservationists and ethicists seized the narrative. "This is how we are seen," became a rallying cry. The trophy hunter, once a figure of contentious tradition, was now reframed through an alien lens as a galactic psychopath. Social pressure, once local, became a species-level shamming. But the counterreaction was fierce. Hunting advocacy groups called it galactic propaganda, an attack on human culture and sovereignty. They doubled down, posting more trophy images, a defiant assertion of identity. The political landscape polarized overnight, yet something was different. The debate was no longer just about animal rights or tradition. It was about human identity on a cosmic stage. The stakes were no longer terrestrial, they were existential. Then came the response we could not have modeled. It did not come from governments or institutions, it came from individuals, in the thousands, then millions. They began posting their own data, not of kills, but of renunciations, hunters destroying their trophies, fishers cutting up their licenses. A viral movement tagged "The Great Refusal." Accompanying these acts were personal testimonies. "I never saw it that way. What does my pride matter if it makes us monsters to the universe?" It was a mass, public grappling with the shadow self. Zin watched, her head tilted. They are not just debating, they are performing public penance. This is a religious-level response. More startling was the artistic and narrative output. Films, novels, music, and virtual reality experiences exploded, exploring the concept of humanity as the galactic bad guy. They weren't just defending or apologizing, they were asterisk storytelling their own dilemma. They were using the very creativity that sprang from the same complex minds that devised the hunt to understand it. Cree observed, they are integrating the shadow, not by eliminating it, but by making art about it. This is unprecedented. 4 weeks after the broadcast, the first official governmental responses coalesced. Not one, but many. A coalition of nations announced the Galactic Ethical Accord, a unilateral moratorium on all commercial trophy hunting, and a revision of deep space probe protocols to include stringent xenological ethical reviews. It was a direct, legal response to the images we had sent. But another power bloc, reliant on hunting tourism, refused to sign. The internal conflict was now encoded in law. Humanity was not unified, but it was asterisk activated. The Institute director reviewed the data. The intervention has triggered a socio-ethical immune response. The pathogen, the recreational killing complex, is being actively contested by the host's cultural antibodies. The prognosis remains uncertain, but the passive trajectory has been altered. Our mission was complete. We had our answer. Human intent was not a monolith. It was a battlefield, and the battle had been joined. We prepared to depart, our cloaked ship turning from the vibrant, troubled blue world. Then a final signal pierced the static. A narrowband transmission, directed not broadly, but specifically toward the Lagrange point where we were hidden. It was from a coalition of human scientists, philosophers, and interestingly, former military leaders. The message was simple. We received your diagnosis. We are attempting to treat the condition. We request a follow-up consultation, not with our governments, with you, the observers. We wish to understand the full scope of the database from which we are judged. Will you meet? Attached were coordinates in the outer solar system and a time. It was an invitation, a risk, a hope. The director left the decision to us. We were the experts. We had touched the paradox. Now it was asking for a dialogue. Zin was the first to speak. They are not asking for forgiveness. They are asking for the chart. They want to see their own medical records. This is a sign of a sapient mind seeking health, not just dominance. Cree was wary. It is also a perfect trap for curious observers, a new kind of hunt. But the curiosity was now ours. We had studied them as a subject. Now the subject was asking to co-author the paper. We voted. The decision was yes. The meeting place was a desolate moon of Jupiter. Our small craft approached. A single human vessel awaited, a sleek research ship. No weapons, docking protocols were exchanged. The airlock connected. On the other side stood three humans, not soldiers, not diplomats, a neuroscientist, an evolutionary biologist, a historian of violence. They had brought data slates, not guns, and they had brought a gift, a small, sealed container. The lead human, the neuroscientist, spoke through a translator. "Thank you for the mirror. It was horrifying and necessary. We have begun. This is a sample of what we are doing with it." The container held cultural artifacts, a draft of a new international treaty banning the trade of hunting trophies, schematics for deep space probes whose primary mission was ecological observation with weapons systems removed, and a virtual reality simulation designed not for hunting games, but for letting users experience the chase from the perspective of the prey. "We are trying to build a new feedback loop," the human said, "one that rewards empathy, not just mastery." We shared data for hours, not just our findings on them, but contexts from our database. We showed them how other predator species channeled their drives. We showed them the tragic histories of civilizations that failed to control their expansionist pleasures. It was a peer review of their own soul. As we prepared to leave, the human historian asked the final question. "In your records, are we alone? Are we the only ones who have this sickness?" I consulted the core database. The answer was complex. You are not alone in experiencing the pleasure of the hunt. You are alone in building temples to it. You are alone in making it a hobby. The capacity exists elsewhere. The civilization does not. That is your unique burden and your unique responsibility. The return voyage to the Institute was quiet, filled with reflection. We had gone to judge a predator. We had found a patient and a doctor in the same species. The volatile ethical paradox was not a verdict. It was a description of an ongoing process. Our final report to the Galactic Council was not a threat assessment. It was a recommendation. We advised against quarantine, against fear-based containment. Instead, we proposed a carefully managed observational mentorship, a probation with humanity as the probationer of its own nature. The Council agreed, by a narrow margin. Humanity would be observed, but also engaged. A line of communication was opened. The first Interspecies Ethics Committee was formed. And the final, surprising detail. It came from a routine scan of Earth's datasphere 1 year after our meeting. We found a new cultural trend, a form of hunting that involved no killing at all. Humans were using advanced drones and immersive technology to track animals in the wild. The challenge was the same: the stalk, the find, the perfect observation. The trophy was a holographic photograph, a genetic scan, or a behavioral recording. They called it ecological ghosting. The economic models showed it was starting to outturn traditional trophy hunting in several regions. The pleasure centers still lit up. The chase was still on, but the endpoint had changed, from a corpse on a wall to a life understood. Zin looked at the scans. They are rewiring the loop. They are keeping the thrill and losing the kill. Kree offered a rare flicker of approval. Perhaps their greatest predator instinct was not for hunting, but for problem-solving. They identified a flaw in their own design, and they are attempting a patch. The galaxy is vast and quiet. For now, the story of humanity is no longer a heading in our predator database. It is a living document in a new file we have created. The file is labeled Species in Therapy. We continue to observe. The probe is still headed for the Diamond Sail Behemoth. The human vessel still orbits the Singing Moon. The switch inside the human mind is still there. But now, beside it, a new sign has been placed by their own hands. A sign that reads, in countless languages, "Danger, think before you flip." Our work on Homo sapiens is not concluded. It is, perhaps, just beginning. And as we turn our senses to the next mystery, we are left with a revised and lingering question, not about them, but about us. What does it mean to be the doctors for a species that is learning to heal itself? What does it mean to be the doctors for a species learning to heal itself? It means our database is no longer a catalog of fixed natures. It is a ledger of choices. Humanity has shown that the most dangerous predator is not the one with the sharpest claw, but the one with the most conflicted heart. And the most hopeful sign in the cosmos is not a peaceful world, but a world at war with its own darkness. We have closed the initial file on Homo sapiens *. They have been reclassified, not as a predatory threat, but as a self-modifying paradox. Their entry now includes a dynamic subroutine that tracks their cultural and ethical evolution in real time. The probe heading for the Diamond Sail Behemoth, its mission parameters were updated remotely. It is now an observer tasked with creating a detailed ecological portrait, not a ballistic sample. The switch was not removed. It was surrounded by safeguards. Our role has changed too. We are no longer just xenobiologists. We are witnesses to an experiment in sapient evolution happening at light speed. The question we asked them, "Do you know what you are?" echoes back to us. We thought we were studying the hunter. We discovered we were documenting the emergence of the healer from within the hunter. That may be the true anomaly. So what remains for us, the observers? To watch, to learn, and to be prepared for the day when their vessels, crewed not by algorithms but by living, breathing, contradictory humans, finally reach a star where someone is home. Will they extend a hand, or will they sight down a scope? The evidence suggests they are capable of both. Their future is a choice, repeated every day. And perhaps that is the ultimate revelation of our study. The universe is not filled with monsters and saints. It is filled with creatures writing their own story, one decision at a time. Humanity's story is uniquely terrifying and uniquely hopeful because they are the only authors who have ever written a chapter where they try to erase their own worst instincts. They are editing themselves in real time. For now, the galaxy watches, the database updates, and we continue our work, scanning the endless dark for other flashes of light, other contradictions, other stories waiting to be told. If you found this galactic perspective illuminating, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. The universe is vast, and every story we uncover changes how we see our own place within it. Until next time, keep looking up and keep questioning what you think you know.